Welcome to the Career Wanderlust podcast, your compass for new career horizons. Today, we are talking with Jeff Koo. Jeff is a senior communications professional with an expertise building high performing teams and developing programs that empower the world's most innovative tech companies. With over 18 years of experience, Jeff has worked across multiple tech and consumer tech sectors with a variety of clients, from early stage startups like Dropcam to growth companies such as Shopify to global enterprises such as SAP, OnePlus, and Intel. Currently a VP of technology with Shift Communications, Jeff has previous experience including running his own consultancy and holding leading roles with agencies such as We Communications, Spark PR, and Bateman Agency. I am really excited to learn more. Jeff, thank you for joining us on the Career Wanderlust podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jolie. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. And you've done a lot in your career. You have moved your way up through the ranks. You've also done things on your own. So I would love to know if there's any piece of career advice or a belief or something that's helped carry you through all of these years that has really helped you.
Yeah, I found my way to PR through a somewhat untraditional route. I don't have a communications background. I studied psychology at Berkeley.
Ooh.
But the through line for me has been I've always been a huge technology fan and kind of a geek. So I think one of the most important things about this career is figuring out what you really enjoy doing and what your interests are and trying to find some alignment there. And for me, tech PR was the right alignment for me.
Now, how did you find that going from psychology into PR? Because and a lot of times we find our roles so randomly. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, it was during a period of unemployment actually in my early 20s. I had left a job and thought to myself, well, maybe I should get another job immediately. But someone older and wiser told me, hey, why don't you spend a little bit of time thinking about what you want to do as the next step in your career? And that made a lot of sense to me. I had already spent so much time paying taxes and unemployment insurance was available to me. So I use that time to really explore what interested me. And at the time, I thought it was marketing, but the more I looked into it, I realized, well, okay, marketing is interesting, but it seems like something you'd have to study for. And advertising seemed great, but I also didn't have an art degree. And then I noticed something called public relations that my friend was working at an agency called Spark PR for. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, I think I'm interested in PR. Can we have a coffee and, talk about your work? And he initially thought, oh, I don't think you'd be right for this because you have to be really into technology. I was like, well, actually, I read TechCrunch every day, and I've been a subscriber to, PC Magazine since I was in my tweens. So, um, yeah, he gave me an opportunity, and I interviewed at Spark, and that was really the start of my career. So, I
That's
think, yeah, following my passion,
fantastic.
started
That's
in the right.
fantastic. You're reading PC Mag since your tweens. Yes, you belong in tech PR.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of growing up in San Francisco, really. I
Yeah.
think, part of it is in my blood, just having seen the tech scene rise up around me.
Right, right. A really fascinating perspective too, when you have living in Silicon Valley, growing up and watching it expand and grow throughout your not only adulthood, but your childhood, and then to see it into adulthood is pretty fascinating. And I have to say, I'm going to give that person some props because that was excellent advice. So often that happens when we're let go or in between jobs. It's the instinct is to get the next job, just get a next job, right?
Yeah.
And so many people don't spend the time thinking about, well, what is it that I actually want? What made me happy in this previous job? What made me miserable? What can I focus on? How can I get rid of more of the miserable and really focus on more of the things I love? And what does that look like? And where should I go? And really getting clear on that brings magic into your career. So really, really good advice. So, you joined PR. You clearly found something that you love and have continued on with it. So, through all of these years, I'm sure you've had some interesting stories. Is there one or two stories you could share with us that actually had an impactful lesson for you? You went through an experience and you learned something from it and it had a positive impact. Is there anything you could share with us?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned in PR and business in general is you kind of have to find a reason to be passionate about what you do. And you have to find that motivation to, create business around you. And part of that is also understanding where your personal strengths lie.
Mhm,
When I was working at Spark PR, one of the things that I noticed is a lot of people around me were very good at networking. They were able
mhm,
to go to social events and find new business leads. And I'd kind of pondered, like, okay, well, can I do something like that?
mhm.
I think as a outgoing social person in San Francisco who is also gay, I have a lot of, I had a lot of great contacts in my network as an LGBT person. And I thought, you know what? There's a lot of money being spent in the market, and I should be able to find new business here. So I did. And, the process of going about that was not exactly super organized. It was mostly just talking to the people that I knew that were in business. But my lucky break came when I happened to be at TechCrunch Disrupt, staffing the event for another client. And I noticed that Joel Simkai, the CEO and founder of Grindr, was going to be speaking on stage. So I made it a point to be there that day. And as he was going off stage, I approached him totally, cold in person. He was literally walking out the door.
Yeah. I love this. Okay, go.
Yeah. And, so I just introduced myself. I said, "Hi, I'm Jeff Koo, longtime fan of, what you do. In fact, I was probably one of the first people to download Grindr. And I just wanted to ask you, do you have PR representation?" Just super direct. And he kind of took a step back and was a little surprised by my boldness. And he said that he did, but he still gave me his card.
Mhm.
He still gave me his card. And, he said, "You know what? Follow up with me because there might be a chance that we could use someone." And so I did. And I met someone who was managing marketing at the time. Unfortunately, the ask that they wanted was for international expansion, and that was
Mhm.
not within our wheelhouse at the time. But the contact that I made passed my information along, and the next CMO that was there reached out to me, and that's when I got the account.
Fantastic. Oh, I love this so much. So what tell me, what did you learn from that experience before I start jumping in?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I learned is that networking is a lot simpler, I think, than people make it up to be. I mean, you're playing a role. Everyone knows at a networking event, you're there to drum up new business. So
Mhm,
I think for me, it makes it a lot easier if I tell myself, okay, we're all here, we're all playing a role, we all know
mhm.
what each other is after. So I'm just going to be straightforward about it. I mean, of course, with the experience that I have now, I don't just, go up to someone and ask them if they have PR representation and if they're happy with it.
Why? Why would you not do that now? I'm curious.
I think I'm a little more smooth now. That kind of like pretty early in my career. I
How would
think
you
that,
do it now? How would you do it
yeah,
now? I'm curious.
I would just start with small talk,
Okay.
at social events. Part of the art of this networking thing is also just treating people like people, and having small talk. Small talk is such an important aspect of conversation that people don't really think about or maybe they don't like. But
I
I
agree.
find that, establishing rapport with a person, finding some commonalities, that's really essential. And then, you could wrap with a little bit of what you do, and it's afterwards that you make the hard sell or the
Mhm.
not hard sell, but like the pitch.
So let me ask you this. Let's say you're at a networking event, right? And you come across someone that you think could be a great prospect for you. Do you spend that time just chit-chatting and having a good connection and then you email them later, like the day after? Or do you go into it before they walk away? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the situation, but generally my strategy is to ask them a lot of questions
Mhm.
because people like to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And when you ask someone a lot of questions, they they immediately feel like they are connecting with you
Mhm.
because you're showing an interest in them. And I try to do this from an authentic person to person perspective. I don't want anyone to feel like I'm using them to gain access. But in some situations where, it's very clear that we're here for networking, or maybe it's really competitive, like at a big trade show at CES,
Yeah.
I do give, a little spiel about what I do and my experience just so that they can remember who I am.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you got your little elevator pitch that you'll throw in there at the end, if you
Right,
will.
right.
Okay. And do you have a go-to question? I always like to ask people this because look, networking is really hard for a lot of people. And making those authentic connections can be difficult if you don't have that, there's just some people just have that aspect in them, right? That it's natural. Some people
Mhm.
don't. They have to work a little harder. Do you have a go-to question that you find helps open people up?
I think here I lean back on the small talk stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of have to start with that lower level, very common engagement. So if I'm at a networking event, I'll ask them, how's your day going? Or if there was like a talk, I'll ask them, like, what did you think of the talk? Something low level, easy to respond, not super personal. Yeah, I think those are the types of,
Yeah.
initiation questions that I'll go after. But it's always a question to try to draw them into a conversation with me.
Right. Well, I have to say, well, going up in the boldness of going up also is impressive because not everyone has that. Even if you were younger and whatnot, not everyone has the gumption to do that. So I'm going to give you some credits for that as well.
Thanks. Yeah. I was also really inspired by an episode of Mad Men where Don Draper told a junior staffer that, your value to an agency is really about the clients that you can bring in the door. And,
Oh, mm,
really anyone can do that at an agency, regardless of
mhm.
whether or not it's in your job description.
Yeah,
And I think me being able to do that at a young age, at an early point in my career, really helped differentiate me.
absolutely. Well, and even just being able to do that once and having the result, it kind of opens up this openness of you of being open to different challenges and stepping outside of the box and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
It's a muscle that you stretch. That you would.
Yeah. And, I think one other element of this story that I like is that I looked within my community. And, even though the initial pitch to Grinder didn't really result in anything, my name did get passed on to other people working in that industry. So before I actually got Grinder as an official client, I had been introduced to other CEOs of other gay dating apps. And so I represented I represented Jacked, which is part of Online Buddies. I'd done a lot of that work. It also brought in other leads later on, like Match.coms.
Amazing. It just goes to show you every interaction is meaningful, and it really doesn't matter what's happening because that connection, like you said, you didn't get Grinder right away, but it led you to all these other things, and then eventually Grinder came back around. So, everything we're doing is important, and everything we're doing has an impact, and that's important to remember. And this is a good story that shows you that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And, I'll add one more thing about Grinder. It was amazing work to work within the gay community. Everyone thinks of Grindr as a hookup app, but I
Mhm.
had the opportunity to really expand the brand. They were looking to change people's perceptions about Grindr, and so they wanted to launch a media property called Into Magazine. So that's the scope of work that I was brought on to help them with. And it did really well. We kicked it off with a really glamorous rooftop party in
Nice.
West Hollywood, Los Angeles. There were a lot of media present. They hired an amazing editor and chief content officer, Zach Stafford, who went on to become the editor of The Advocate. And he was
Nice.
actually at the Met Gala last night. So his
Nice.
career just kind of skyrocketed after that. But he was a great person to pitch, a young queer Black editor. And they also hired a woman named Trix Bendix. And I think it's great to be able to work with the queer community. I was able to get them both on with Kara Swisher and Casey Newton.
No,
Um,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Being gay in the community, how has that changed for you from the beginning of your career to now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that oftentimes people view those elements of their personhood as potential things that might hold them back.
Mhm.
But I've really had to shift my thinking about that. It went from, oh, I'm concerned about this, you know, creating problems to it being something that has helped my career.
Right.
And I've always made it a point, not necessarily to come out to every client, but
Mhm.
just to not be afraid of something like that,
Right.
like to be my authentic self. Because at
Right.
the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to work with me because they're homophobic, that's not someone that I want to work with.
Yeah, that has nothing to do
Yeah.
with you. Says
Yeah.
a lot about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important thing. And I love that because it just happens with maturity so often, right? And well, I can't say maturity because sometimes we need
Safety.
things around us to
Yeah.
grow. Exactly. Exactly. But, so often, and this is anything in our lives, right? I mean, this could be someone like I was talking with someone who was autistic, right? And how they saw that growing up in themselves, but how they see it now and how so often things that maybe we struggled with at some points in our life, they become our superpowers. And it's just a matter of the shift of how we look at it and evolve in our own life with that aspect of ourselves, if you will. But yes, when it comes to certain things like LGBTQ, there's a lot of mitigating circumstances all around
Yeah.
you that also make a very, very big difference. And that's why I was kind of curious because there's been a lot of changes throughout the past 20 years and,
Mhm.
just within that realm. So,
Thank God.
right?
Well,
Seriously,
time.
I was watching something the other day. We were watching this show from the 90s, and it was just like, it was a different world. It was a different world. And, and it's interesting to watch these, like, if you have children and to have those conversations, be like, oh, yeah. So that used to be okay, not okay. This is really good. This is how we've grown. This is how we've developed. These are all beautiful things.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. Now, what about challenges? Because we've all go through a lot of challenges in our careers. What's been one or two of your bigger challenges? How did you face it? How did you overcome? What you learn from it?
Yeah. I mean, there's really been no shortage of challenges in this career. Tech PR is a challenging career. And I'm thankful that I really love tech because I don't think I could have done it if I didn't. But I think one of the biggest challenges in my career was actually learning the trade in and of itself. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a traditional background in PR. I come from a very, you know, uh, I had a tiger mom, so to speak, and she really pushed me to be excellent in academics. And so I went to a really academically rigorous high school, Lowell High School in San Francisco. Shout out to my Cardinals. But, Lowell, if you know anything about it, is a feeder school for Stanford and Berkeley, and everyone there is just so smart. The high school has had so many famous individuals that have come from Lowell. But anyway, I went from that kind of environment going into Berkeley, where everyone is also very smart.
Hmm.
And then I bounced around for a couple years in unrelated jobs. But by the time I made it to PR, I think I had developed some not great habits in terms of working.
Like in what
I
way?
think one of those was just not understanding how a collaborative team in a
Mm,
highly dynamic environment operates.
mhm.
And so I wasn't doing certain things that was expected of me. And they were concerned because I wasn't asking enough questions. And I also wasn't providing proactive updates on everything that I was doing. I mean, this is at the start of my career. So I really didn't understand how things worked. But, circling back to your initial question about challenges, I had a manager pull me aside and she was like, "Hey, we have a problem. You're not doing certain things. We need you to change some of your behavior around this." And she actually gave me a list of like 30 different things she wanted me to do differently. It was like the wildest manager meeting I've ever had because I walked away from it thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job if I don't turn this boat around." But also, I have a clear list of 30 things, that I need to work on. And so I just took that in as information about how I could perform better. Because up to then, I was afraid of asking questions. I didn't want people to
Right,
think that I didn't understand what was going on.
right.
And I was afraid of sharing proactive updates because sometimes they were, "Hey, I need more time to do this." But what I learned is that those qualities, those behaviors are really important in an environment like tech PR where things change quickly and you have to adapt and you have to learn to pivot on a dime.
Absolutely.
But I taped those 30 points to my monitor and I just worked on them every day. I stared at them and I thought, okay, they want me to ask questions. I'll ask questions. They want me to provide an update. I will provide an update. And after a few weeks, I had another meeting with my manager and she was just really impressed that I had turned this boat around because everyone noticed that there was an immediate shift.
This is impressive. And the reason this is impressive is because you took that feedback in a very gracious, mature way, and then you used it to make yourself better. And this is key. It sounds very simple, but it's actually very difficult to do. And I see this over and over again. Because look, we all have our own little saboteurs, right? These little things inside us that will rise up and kind of sabotage us without us fully realizing it. And a lot of times that happens when we're getting some feedback we're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
So, for a lot of people, when they get feedback they're uncomfortable with, a wall will come up and it will become more about the other person or the situation, what have you, and they're unwilling to hear or accept whatever is being shared with them, which is actually information that is there to help them. So, the fact that you were able to sit with it, listen, you wrote down, put it on your computer to remind you to continue to adjust. This is all really, really smart, really brilliant, and great advice. And then you turned it around and it is noticeable. When people do this, it is noticeable. It's just like in sports, I mean, coaches want an athlete who is coachable, right?
Yep.
Same thing in our careers, managers would love people who are coachable. And when you're coachable, that's how you get to the peak performance of your game. It's a really good example.
Yeah. Feedback is very challenging for a lot of people. And I think a part of the reason is because it does quite often feel like a personal attack,
Mhm.
and giving it is also really hard for a lot of people because people don't like conflict. And they know how people feel sometimes when they get
Mhm.
feedback because they've gotten it themselves and they don't like it. It's an uncomfortable feeling. But some of the best advice I've read about feedback comes from Liz Wiseman, who is the author of Multipliers and Impact Players.
Ooh.
Probably had other people talking about her. She's
No, I don't not multiply not that book specifically, that is.
Yeah, I highly recommend people read these books. She worked at a large enterprise in Silicon Valley, but she wrote these books and, they are New York Times bestsellers. But Liz Wiseman says some really smart things about how to give and receive feedback. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind is you really have to separate the person from the performance. And I know that sounds a little bit like don't take feedback personally, but I think that's actually the hard way of thinking about feedback. So
Okay.
she says that if you if you are trying to take feedback by like staying open minded and taking it in and processing it and trying to thank people for giving you feedback, she actually thinks that's the hard way.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I think that's the way that most people try to take feedback.
Yeah.
But I think the easier way is what she describes as stop thinking about it as feedback on the person and more about getting guidance for your work. So, for example, when you are seeking feedback, don't ask for what you as a person could do to improve. Shift your orientation and think about, asking for guidance on your work. And so feedback then becomes information. It's
Mhm.
neither positive nor negative nor judgment on you. It's just data that you could use to improve your job. Like a thermostat, for example,
Yeah.
its job is to calibrate the temperature in the room and it tells you whether it's cold or hot. And that's not positive nor negative. It's just
Mhm.
information that it uses to do its job better. Another example I love is, concert violinists. They start every session with a tuning. And that's because they assume from the get go that they're somehow a little bit out of tune. And I think that's true of business too. You have to assume that, what you know and what you're thinking about could possibly be not aligned with the rest of your team. So, thinking about ways to get information on how you could do your job better is a great way of taking in feedback and asking for it. And also trying to train your team members to think about it in the same way will conversely make it easier for you to also share feedback.
Absolutely. I loved that so much. It just felt really good inside the way you put that. It felt right, right? That guidance that just feels really good. And I am going to use that moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, like so often we want to tell people things like, hey, here's what you could have done better on this presentation. And it just comes off as like, this is my feedback about you.
Mhm.
Right. But if it's posed in a different way, like, hey, that was great. How can we improve this the next time around? How can we improve the reception for this presentation? I think that does two things. First of all, it takes it off of the person and more about the work. And then secondly, it gets them thinking about what they could do differently. And I think that's also really important with feedback is you can't tell a person what they should do differently and have them really take it and run with it. You kind of have to help them discover it for themselves because change really happens when you come up with the idea yourself. And that's what I generally try to do is to help guide people towards discovering, those ideas because I think they know.
Is there a way you do that with your team?
Yeah, I mean it's exactly, that kind of thinking where it's less about me telling them like, "Hey, like here's what you could do differently," and more about like asking them questions like, "Hey, how did you think that went? What do you think you could have done differently?"
Mhm. That's really, really great. I love that. Now, Jeff, I'm curious because it's a difficult time right now in the market, in this economy, if you will. There's a lot of people looking for work and whatnot. Is there anything that you would share with people who are currently out of work looking for something new, either that's helped you in get your jobs or that helped you in between? Is there anything you'd share?
Yeah, absolutely. I got some great advice from a former manager, Steve Kearns. He was my manager at We Communications. And I reached out to him during a period of unemployment where I was just, really struggling with the current economy, actually. And he said, number one, remember your value. You are a tech PR person that's worked in this space in San Francisco where all these tech companies want to be and want to know how they do tech PR right and, act like a Silicon Valley company. So there's a lot of people that want you on their team. And then secondly, he said, spend a lot of time just reaching out to people on LinkedIn to catch up, like 20, 30 minutes a day, thinking about who you liked, who you worked well with, who you're friends with. and just catch up with them.
Yeah.
Don't make it about you're looking for work, but just say, hey, it's been a while since we've connected. I really enjoyed working with you. Curious about what you're up to. Do you have 10, 15 minutes for a quick Zoom? And I think that idea is really powerful because most people don't want to do that. But
Mhm.
the moment you send a message like that to someone and they see the opportunity for personal connection, I think they something clicks and they're like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to reconnect. And not everyone will do that, but the engagement is so low, like just 10 minutes to catch up with a friend. And the great thing about this strategy is I think it helps you not have to search alone. Obviously on the call, you're going to let them know, but the idea is you are planting little seeds everywhere with everyone so that, if by chance they do hear of an opportunity, they can think back and send you that lead.
Yeah.
I think the other great thing about this too is, if you ever do need to go back to them and ask them for some help, it's not so much of a cold call where you're going to them for the first time after many years.
Right.
It's saying, hey, I need your help. It's a follow up to a friendlier conversation.
Right. That's really good advice. Yeah. And worst case scenario is you just rekindle a connection that used to be meaningful to you, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. And, in our industry, relationships and influence and knowing what's going on everywhere around you is important and useful. So I try to continue to do that even though I have a job. But yeah, I think it's good to continue to connect. And
Yeah.
it's advice that I've continued on since then.
That's great.
Yeah. One other thing that I have thought of too is saying yes to things. I
Right.
think so often we say no to things because either we're afraid or insecure, or maybe you're just not feeling like it. But I think, even if you're not working, there are opportunities for you to do things for people. And I think the opportunity to do something kind for someone is especially important because, not to get too woo woo about it, but uh,
Ooh,
like
I
doing
love
a good
Lulu.
deed creates goodwill.
It
I
does.
think you feel better about yourself after doing something,
Exactly.
and that person will remember that you helped them.
Mhm.
So, I had a few opportunities to do that where, people reached out to me and they said, hey, I have this situation where I could use some PR help. The opportunity really wasn't right for me. It was in a space that I wasn't familiar or comfortable with. But I also happened to know some other people through my networking that were looking for gigs and had the right experience. So I made those connections for my friends, and I think they really appreciated it.
Absolutely. And this is a universal truth. This is something I learned from my first podcast, Thriving After 40, where I talked to people over the age of 40 who were thriving in life, who were living their best life about their stories, the arcs, the challenges, their successes, everything. And what I found through studying, over 100 of these, I dissected these stories and over 100 of them, there are absolutely these universal truths that are like building blocks to your most successful life. And that is one of them. If you want to help yourself, the best way to help yourself is to help other people. And every time you go and help other people, you end up helping yourself.
Yeah.
It is an absolute truth. And this is great advice because not through all those conversations, I can't tell you how many people I spoke with who went through very struggling times, similar. I mean, this is a unique position. I've been doing this for over 20 years and the current job market is distinctly unique right now, I will say. However, I will say that lots of people have gone through very difficult times, struggled to find work, out of work for a long time. And these types of things, helping others, volunteering, offering services for free, consulting, doing these different things are what led to so many different opportunities for other people who found themselves absolutely thriving in life because of this. So it
Yeah.
was really good advice.
Yeah. And, once you start getting in the habit of saying yes to things and kind of activating things in your life, things do find their way back to you. You know, I had I through my networking, I had a former client reach out to me after 10 years. It was crazy. I couldn't even believe he remembered me, but this was a former client at Brilliant. Control, which is a smart home device. And I helped launch the company and the product. And it was this whole thing where they sold out in 16 days. So I guess I left a good impression
Yeah.
on them. But yeah, he reached out to me with an opportunity to help him in some new business. And my first reaction was like, oh my gosh, I've never done PR for myself. It's always been with an agency. And even though I'd had many people encourage me, oh, Jeff, you should start your own consultancy. You should go out on your own. You can make so much more money. I was always really afraid of it because I felt like it'd be a lot of work. And then also there'd have to be like new things I'd have to learn. And then also I'd have to like
Yes.
create new things like
Yep.
decks and a brand and a logo and figure out Google Workspace and how to start a business. And my gut response was just like, no, you don't want to do this. You want to focus on finding a full-time job. Um, but I had already made a promise to myself that I would say yes to things at that point.
Yeah.
And so I said yes to the opportunity, and it turned out to be really good for me. I didn't win that account that he was asking me to pitch, but he did bring another account in, and I did win that. And we brought that company to CES this year, January 2025. And I helped them launch two products that they had technically launched last year. So they weren't exactly new, but they were very successful. We secured the official Best of CES award for them, as well as
Fantastic.
two other Best of type awards from notable publications in their industry and
Congratulations.
35 stories and just a ton of impressions, and they were just so thrilled. And I look back and I think, gosh, none of this would have been possible if I hadn't really confronted my fear of starting my own business. And I think it's a sign that, sometimes when you're afraid of things, that is the thing that you might need to do.
100%. I often find myself saying that I am really scared of this. I think that means I'm supposed to step in. And
Yeah.
usually, because usually really good things come from that when I do step into these things that I'm really scared of.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'll acknowledge that this is not necessarily my idea. Tim Ferriss has a great TED talk about fear-based planning, and it's really fascinating. I think people should check it out.
Ooh, I've not heard of it, so I will have to check that out. Jeff, this has been really wonderful. I am so grateful for you coming in. You've shared so many great highlights. One last question before you go, because I like to throw it out. What are you sure of in life?
Yeah, I'm sure that you only really get one life,
I only
and
get one life.
you have to ask for what you want. You have to know what is right for you. You can't just sit back and wait for things to passively happen to you. My father always told me that I was born with a mouth, so I should use it. And it's been great advice. It's helped carry me through a lot of situations.
I love this. It's very true. We have one big, beautiful life. So, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
That's what we get to think about today. What are you going to do with your life today? So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on the Career Wanderlust podcast.
Thank you so much, Sholi. This has been such a great experience.
Thank you for joining us on the Career Wanderlust podcast. If you find value in learning from others, give us a like and subscribe. If you're looking to grow your communications, marketing, public relations, or sales and biz dev team with the best talent and quickly, check us out at paradigmstaffing.com and submit a request. We are wishing you a most successful and fulfilling career. Until next time.